How's the weather down there?
Uh, Old man winter is kind of peeking his head back in.
Yeah.
It Tomorrow it's supposed to, like, it was cold yesterday, and tomorrow it's not that warm today. I'm gonna go out and shoot after we're done shooting this.
Nice.
For a little bit. It's not too bad. It's like low 50s, 40s, high 40s. But tomorrow it's supposed to be like around freezing or below freezing, come morning time, which is not good. But
Yeah. I'm so
summer
over
is
winter.
almost here. I know. I know. It's like when at the end of summer, by the time you get to the end of September, getting into October, you're like, I'm tired of going and just sweating everywhere I go.
Right.
But then by the end of February, when it's been, especially if you've, like, I know for a stretch there, I was going up to different places in Michigan, or like over to Michigan City in Indiana,
Yeah.
by the lake a lot.
Mhm.
And after like multiple weeks of that, and being by the water and it's colder, like, all right, I am ready for not 5 degrees. This
Yes.
sucks. What you drinking today?
So this concoction is screwball peanut butter whiskey and vanilla Coke.
Very nice. I know on Mirrorless Minutes, for those who haven't heard of it, Mirrorless Minutes is a live show that Jamie and friends, I'd say friends, what's the actual cast of Mirrorless Minutes?
So the regular cast is Jerry James. It was when I first started the podcast, though, it was a former member of the Olympus Visionary team, Mike Baining. So when I was in the Olympus Visionary program, I started the Mirrorless Minutes podcast, and I knew I didn't want to do it alone. I liked the format of like a back and forth banter and dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike Baining was new to the program, and he's a fellow Michigan native. So I kind of called on him to see if he'd be interested in co-hosting with me. So he co-hosted with me for 5 years. And then Mike works for Penske Automotive in a very, very high up position. So he's always busy, was always traveling. And just between his work schedule and home life and then squeezing photography and being an ambassador into it, I think it finally got to a point where he's like, okay, something has to give. And so he kind of bowed out of the Olympus Visionary program and then stepped off as a co-host here. And then I brought Jerry on because I've known Jerry for 4 years now, I think. And
How'd
shoot
you
with him
guys
pretty
meet?
regular. Oh, man. So I had this dream of escaping family life for a weekend with a bunch of buddies who were all photographers. And at the time, I owned a camper, like a 32-foot camper that sleeps 6 or 7 people. And I told my wife, I said, I'm going to run away for the weekend with some buddies. We're going to use the camper. So I took a group of friends up for like a guy's weekend of just shooting and sitting around the campfire drinking beer or whatever. And we headed up one night to Little Sable Point. It's a lighthouse on Lake Michigan. And we were up there to shoot the Milky Way.
Mm-hmm.
So we were all facing south. And we'd seen basically the lights from the back of other cameras further down shore from us. So we knew there were other photographers there. And so we were all facing south, shooting the Milky Way rising. And I wanted to do a shot where I had star trails rotating around the lighthouse. So I turned to face north. I started running what's called a live composite. It's like a long exposure feature on the Olympus cameras. And as soon as the image started to display on the back of the camera, I saw northern lights. And I yelled, "Everybody turn north, turn north." And at the same time, I hear this person I didn't know further in the distance, "The northern lights are out." So we were all, pumped up. We're all getting the northern lights over this lighthouse. And then as the way the northern lights work, they faded kind of quick. So everybody got cool shots. And then when it faded, we all just kind of congregated in this group to see who the other people in the sand dunes were. And Jerry was one of the 2 people that were out there that night. So that's kind of how we met. Jerry and I met under the northern lights. It was so beautiful.
It's so romantic.
Yeah, it was kind of cool though, because that weekend was full of amazing things for me. It was a getaway, which is always cool. And then the first night of the getaway, we were in Grand Haven, Michigan, to shoot sunset on the pier of the lighthouse and all of that. And we got there, and a huge storm rolled in, and I got probably some of the most epic lightning shots over the lake that I've ever gotten with the lighthouse in it. So that was night one. Night two, we get the northern lights purely by chance, and then I bump into Jerry, who's been a great friend ever since. So
that's awesome. Cool. You know, I ran into Jerry. I've definitely not known him that long, but I ran into him, I think, also at Grand Haven. I'm pretty certain it was Grand Haven. Back around Christmas time, I went to a bunch of different places up there in Michigan, and Grand Haven was one of those places I ran into him on the pier that's on the right.
Yeah, yep, the North Pier. Yep.
Yeah.
Very cool. It's a good spot.
Yeah, no, I need to go back up there again. The only downside is, see, like where I'm at, I was just having this conversation with one of my friends who also shoots. He just came back from, I forget the park, but it was out in Utah, around Salt Lake. And so like he just came back from this epic trip, and he's showing me all these pictures.
Yeah.
And like before he had gone out there, we had the conversation, like where we live, like right in northern Indiana, like there's some perks, and I'm stretching here by saying some perks, but for like exciting landscape photography, unless you really like open fields, it can be hard or take a lot of searching to find something that's exciting. And especially as he came back from Utah, he's like, man, this is depressing.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Utah's my second home. I love Utah.
But that's the thing, is like when I went up into Grand Haven, like there's a lot of places in Michigan I really haven't explored, especially once you get past the 2-hour mark. Like I really don't ever venture that far north, and I need to more. And I know after talking to Jerry, it sounds like definitely going to do that more often.
Yeah, swing up the next time there's some storms marching across Lake Michigan. It's such a cool place to be. When you get on the west coast of Michigan, a lot of the storms tend to come from west to east. So that means you can sit out on the pier and you have at least a half hour or 40 minutes of no rain and just lightning before the weather actually gets to you. Mm-hmm. And then you've got the foreground, you've got lighthouses and things like that like I feel like you have to have something in the scene other than just a wide open flatness with lightning, So the lighthouses serve that purpose really well. And then like you said, you move further north from there, the landscapes get a lot more interesting and diverse, especially the Upper Peninsula.
Yeah, I was up there in 2019, and I wish I would have I've been into photography and photos, and taking photos for several years, but it was always on. Like I started with mobile, and didn't get an actual proper camera until last year. But all the good traveling I've done in recent time was the year prior to getting a good camera.
Yeah.
And in 2019, I was up in the UP, up in Hubble, which is like way up there on the little Finger Lake Peninsula. It's way up there.
Okay.
Amazing. Yeah. And then last year I actually did make it up to not the UP, but Door County in Wisconsin, which has a lot of UP vibe to it.
Yeah.
If you've never been there, that place is pretty awesome. Like never that whole peninsula. Oh, so awesome.
So is Door County where all the covered bridges are? Or is that Bridges of Madison County? I'm thinking of like a movie or something, but I know that Wisconsin has a lot of covered bridges, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing of Door County. I just know that I think technically the peninsula is more than just Door County. Yeah. But they just call it that. But gotcha. It's just once you get onto the peninsula, it's just small town after small town, but a lot of trails, a lot of scenery.
Cool.
A lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. I haven't spent much time in Wisconsin. Just actually really none. I mean, I've passed through it when I was really young, so I really barely remember. I just remember like hours, it felt like, of driving and just trees on both sides of the road, because we had come over from the UP and then down through Wisconsin. So northern Wisconsin is pretty sparsely populated, I think.
I was going to say, to be fair, I think Wisconsin is kind of in the same boat as Indiana or even Michigan to a different degree. Like Indiana, pretty much everything north of Indy, it's slim pickings.
Yeah.
Michigan, like the southwestern corner, is probably the least exciting from like terrain perspective. And then Wisconsin is like outside of your cities, like your couple big cities, like Milwaukee and Wisconsin. A lot of it is just sparsely populated.
Yeah.
There's some, like as you start to get closer to the UP, there are some pockets of wilderness that could be fun, but
yeah, for sure.
This entire region is rough.
It is, especially if you've, been born and raised in it. I mean, I'm a Michigan native, but I think I think I was just born in the wrong part of the country. I love the Western U.S. I love Utah and Colorado. My first trip to Wyoming was last year, and that was pretty amazing time as well. So, yeah, I like mountains and I like desert.
Yep. So I totally get you there. Like 2020 really pushed me into discovering as much of Indiana as possible. Because for a while you couldn't really leave the state that easily. Mm-hmm. And so like anything and everything is possibly worth seeing in the upper half of this state I have seen, which is a low bar. But it reminded me, because I had not been down past Indy in a long time, that there's actually quite a few things in southern Indiana. And southern Indiana's got a lot of like Kentucky or Tennessee vibes to it in areas. Super hilly, which I had forgotten about.
Yep.
But at that point, if I'm going to drive 5 hours, am I going to go to southern Indiana, or am I going to go like way up into Michigan? Chances are I'm going way up into Michigan.
Yeah. You just want to feel like you're
somewhere
out of
else.
Your home state and somewhere else. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Because if I go 5 hours into Ohio, I don't know if I'm much better off.
Hocking Hills, maybe.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Jerry had mentioned that place.
Yep. Yeah, Hocking Hills is pretty. I've never been. I mean, I've just seen a million photographs of it, but it's on my list. I've got a big list. It keeps getting bigger every year, unfortunately.
What got you into photography?
Oh man,
because you've been doing it quite a while.
Yeah, 2008, 2007, 2008. So I've always been involved in art in one way or another. In high school, I kind of thought that's where I was headed, was a career in graphic arts, and that just never developed. Ended up getting out of high school and just getting a job, a factory job. I'm in the Rust Belt here, so it's kind of common for those who didn't move on to college. But settled into a factory job and met my wife and had a family and was doing all that. And one year we decided to take a family vacation to Florida. It was just my oldest son was our only child at the time, and it was going to be his first time on a plane, and I just wanted to document it, and I knew I needed a legit camera. So this was, pre-mirrorless DSLR days, and I went to Best Buy with my tax refund and looked for the best thing I could get for my money. And at the time, Olympus was sold in Best Buy, big box store. And they had a deal on a 2-lens kit. It was their E500 DSLR, and it had a 14 to 42 and a 40 to 150, I think, combo. And so I picked it up and took it on the trip. And while we were in Florida, I got up one morning to take a sunrise photo and realized I was laying on the ground shooting through the beach grass, and I was just really getting into it. I was having fun. I was digging what I was seeing on the back of the camera, and I just kind of never stopped shooting after that. I wasn't like super serious about it, but I took the camera everywhere I went all the time, and I was just taking random snapshot photos. So I mean, that's kind of how I got my first camera and got into it. But I didn't realize that I was supposed to be a photographer until several years later. I live in a semi-rural area in Michigan. I live in a smaller town and a lot of farms around. And I got up one morning I think it was February, and it was one of those winters where we didn't have snow on the ground. And my wife asked me, "Are you taking my car for an oil change this morning?" I said, yeah, sure. And I went out and threw my camera in the car, and instead of taking the route that I would normally take to the dealership to get the oil change, I decided to cut down some back roads, some country roads. It was a cool morning. It was really low cloud deck, and there were breaks in the clouds, and every once in a while you'd see those shafts of light just coming through the clouds. And I thought, well, I'll probably stop at some point and take a photo here. And I started to come over this hill in the road, and as I crested the hill, it's like a religious moment for me. I crested the hill in this road, and there was this massive old barn sitting out in this field. No houses around it. The barn was probably 250, 300 feet off of the road, an old dirt road. And it just caught my eye because it was so big. It just seemed out of place. And I'm coming down the hill, and I'm watching these rays move across the field, and then they just lit up over the roof, and I just kind of flipped out, and I just gunned the car, and I raced down the road and parked and jumped out and waited for the next band of light to move across the field, and fired off a few shots of it. And I looked at the back of the camera and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to do this. This is what I'm supposed to do. Like, it moved me that much taking that photo that I realized right then I'm probably never going to be without a camera and taking photos. And I haven't stopped since, really.
So then that was 2008. And then I know for a while you were an ambassador for Olympus. Like, what was that process like? Like, how did that happen?
So, 2000. So the defining moment was probably in 2010. 2008, I'd gotten the camera. Immediately upon getting the camera, I mean, think back. Like 2008 was pretty young in social media days, so it was pretty easy to get seen, and with no motive to get like sponsorship or anything like that. I was just posting my photos on Flickr, and it's early days of Twitter. So I was making tweets and linking to the images, and I was always mentioning, shot with my Olympus E500, and this lens. And I was, hashtagging everything, Olympus and landscape photography, whatever. And I'd been doing that since 2008. And I think it was probably 2010 that I went on or 2009 maybe, 2010, one of those 2 years. I went on my first Scott Kelby worldwide photo walk. And are you familiar with those? So the Kelby photo walk it's a photo walk that takes place one day a year globally. So on the same day, all around the world, there are these photo walks happening, and it's to raise money for various charities. So I had gone on one of those, and I had a blast. I thought it was the coolest thing to meet all these photographers, and everybody's there just doing the same thing and having fun. So the next year, I decided I wanted to host one because you could sign up to be a leader, and it's just fun. So I wanted to organize my own, so I did. And in between my first photo walk that I'd gone on and the organizing of the next one, I had become friends with the social media manager at Think Tank Photo, because I had won a bag. Somebody was giving away a bag, and my correspondence was with their social media guy. So we kind of became buddies. This guy, Simon. And so I reached out to Simon and said, hey, I'm doing a Kelby photo walk this year. Do you think Think Tank would send maybe like a handful of stickers or a t-shirt or something I could give away to some of my attendees, And he responded back. He said, I can do you one better. How about I send you 3 bags? And I'm like, yeah, that would be cool. I mean, good camera bags are expensive, and if I can give away 3, holy cow, that'll draw more people into the walk. And so he set that up, and in one of our conversations, he said, man, I really wish I knew someone like you at Olympus. And he says, well, I can help you out there. I'm friends with the president of Olympus Europe, and here's his email address. And so he sent me his email address, guy Mark Thakara. And he said, keep in mind, he's the president of Olympus Europe. He's a busy guy. he might not respond back. Don't take offense to it or whatever. But reach out. So I did. I emailed Mark, and that very evening, I emailed him first thing in the morning, and that evening I got an email response back, and he says, "Hey Jamie, good to talk. We know who you are. We see you on social media all the time promoting the brand. We really appreciate it. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can do because I'm Olympus Europe, but I have taken the liberty of forwarding your message to me off to my counterpart in North America." And he says, hopefully they can help you out. And that was that. And I thought, holy cow. And I didn't hear anything for a minute. It was like a week. And then I was camping with my family, here in Michigan. And I get this phone call, and I look at my phone, and it says New York. And I'm thinking, I don't know anybody in New York. And I said, hey, honey, are we behind on a bill or something? Who the heck's calling us from New York City? So I answer the phone, and it's this guy, Charles. And he says, hey, is Jamie? I said, yeah, hey, who's this? He said, hi, my name's Charles Leone. I work for Mullen Lowe. We're the PR agency for Olympus North America. Do you have a second? I said, I've got all the time you need. What's going on? So he just kind of told me the story of how Olympus received the email from Olympus Europe, forwarded it off to him because they were the PR agency that Olympus used, and asked me if I'd be interested in being a part of a program that didn't exist. And I says, well, what does that mean? And he says, well, we don't really have an official program for loaning out gear, but we'd like to send you gear whenever you want, and just keep doing what you're doing. He says, you don't have to do anything different. Just shoot with it and tag us and mention what gear you're using, etc. I said, yeah, sign me up, And I said, what do I get? He says, what do you want? So I put together a list of equipment I wanted, and about 4 days later, this giant 30-pound box shows up on my doorstep, FedExed overnight to me.
That's amazing.
It's wild, but again, it's like the earlier days in social media. There weren't people with, 50 million Instagram followers and things like that. So it was a little bit easier to make waves. Mm-hmm. And I did that for about a year. And it's like the following summer, there's a festival that happens near here in Jackson, Michigan. It's a hot air balloon festival. It's pretty big. And I knew that I was going to have the opportunity to go up in some balloons. And I wanted a specific lens to borrow for the occasion. So I emailed Charles. I said, hey, I need this lens. This is the event I want to do. I'm going to use it for. And I didn't hear back. And the time's getting closer, and I emailed him again. I didn't hear back. And I emailed him again. I'm starting to get a little ticked off, I'm like, what the heck's going on, So another email, and I'm probably a little testy and short in the last email, saying, hey, I'm about out of time. I don't know if you guys are going to help me out or not. I was getting irritated. And I sent that email out. And 20 minutes later, I get an email back saying, can you do a conference call at 2:30 today? And that was it. That's all it said. And I thought, oh, shoot, I think I'm in trouble. So I said, yeah, I can, and hit, reply. And then he sent me back a calendar invite. And so when I accepted the invite, I noticed then a bunch of names, other attendees on the list. And it was people I had never heard of or didn't know who they were, and they all had Olympus email addresses. Jennifer Colucci, who was the ambassador, she managed the ambassador program, a Japanese name. There were names I didn't know. And I was like, oh man, I'm either super good right now or I am so screwed. I don't know which one it is. So I get out of work that afternoon and drive a block from where I'm working at the time, pull over into a parking lot and take the call. And they asked me if I wanted to be a member of the Olympus Visionary program, their ambassador program. And I sat there quietly, and somebody, I don't remember now who it was, said, I'm going to take that as stunned silence, which is a yes. I said, yes. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Yes. I can't even believe this is happening to me. So, that's how I got into that role, and that's what the acceptance was like. And it was a cool journey. I did that role for them for about 10 years.
That's awesome.
In various positions. Like the title changed over the course of the 10 years. It started off as a visionary, and then they decided to tier the program. And then they made a section called the Trailblazer. So I was a Trailblazer for a while. And then they thought, well, that sounds stupid. So then they made us all Visionaries again. And then they changed the program again and really diversified it, because by this point, we had Instagram influencers and we had people who just lead workshops and things like that. So the last couple of years with Olympus, I had been rolled from the Visionary program into the Educators program because of the podcast that I've been doing for 6 years, and because I lead workshops around the country. So they felt I had a better role as an ambassador in that way. And then like 2 months ago, I think about 2 months ago, they had shifted the program yet again, because the Olympus camera division has since been sold off to another company to kind of rescue it, because it's not the biggest brand out there and it's a really competitive market. So they were struggling. So a company bought that end of it out, and as part of that restructuring, they changed everything. And now I'm jobless. Actually, I tell people I'm free. It was a cool journey, 10 years of, if I took the camera into my room and showed you my shelves, it'd gross you out. I have 2 of pretty much everything they've made in the last 10 years. It's ridiculous how much gear we were given. It was great to get it, but you were constrained to only using that gear. So for 10 years, I only was able to use Micro Four Thirds cameras. Actually just Olympus stuff. So now that I'm out of contract, I've got a Pelican case sitting behind me with a Sony in it, and I've got a Fuji on the shelf, and I've kind of expanded a bit since finding this freedom.
How that's a crazy rocket ship of a ride. Holy cow.
Yeah.
What was that transition like when, like, had you been eyeing the Sony for a while, or was it kind of a similar starting fresh situation? You kind of like, well, you picked that one. Like, had you been looking at them for quite a while?
Yeah, I mean, if you're an ambassador for a brand, you're always kind of keeping an eye on what everybody else is doing, because Olympus is a crop sensor camera. It's literally half the sensor size of a full frame camera. So you're always watching what the other brands are doing, because when you're trying to sell somebody on the system you're representing, you need to know how to talk about the benefits of yours versus theirs. So, and I'm a nerd. I'm always paying attention to specs and what things can do and what, this and that. So I knew all about the Sony system, and being a landscape photographer and someone who likes to shoot astro, I knew that I wanted low light capabilities. And the Micro Four Thirds system, Olympus specifically, I can speak to, does great in low light, but it's not the same as a full frame sensor, especially the Sony A7 III or one of their lower megapixel S series cameras. Those are just unbeatable in low light. So that's pretty much why I jumped into Sony, is for the low light capability and the dynamic range that you get from the full frame sensor. The Fuji camera that I got was just on a whim. Fuji had sent me their medium format camera to use the other summer, and it was 2 summers ago now, to test out and see how I liked it or whatever, provide feedback. And the Fuji color science is cool, so I knew I wanted to play around with that more now that I was off contract. So I bought the Fuji just for that. But my primary cameras now are still my Olympus and the Sony for what I like to shoot.
Which one do you prefer shooting with now?
It's situational. I've been shooting, if you look at like my Flickr feed, it's primarily the Sony right now. I'm still definitely in my honeymoon phase with it. I'm still figuring it out, even after having had it for a while now. But if I'm going to go shoot storms coming in, I love to shoot lightning and things like that. You can't beat the tech that's in Olympus, and you can't beat the weather sealing. I mean, these cameras, I've sat out on the pier in Grand Haven or various piers in Michigan for hours on end getting soaked by rain, and I give up way before my camera does. I've never had a camera fail under driving rains. Jerry, if you talk to him about Olympus sometime, he'll tell you you just can't beat him for that. But the tech that I like is that live composite feature I mentioned earlier. It's like a long exposure that won't overexpose. Nobody does anything like it. There's
That's
not another.
awesome.
Yeah, there's no one's doing anything like it, and I think it's probably patented or whatever, by Olympus. But the way it works is, let's say you're in Chicago, and you want to get a star trail shot over the city. Normally, with a traditional system, you're going to shoot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of frames, and then in Photoshop, layer them all together. With the Olympus camera, you expose for the city lights, and you set like I call it a base exposure. You take one shot, and then that shot is locked in and frozen. And then when you trigger the shutter the second time, it keeps that base exposure frozen there, and any change in light is added to that image. So if a car drives by, you get light trails. If a jet flies over, you get that. If the stars, over the course of an hour or two, as we're rotating, they look like they're spinning, that is added to that image. And at the end of it, out pops a raw file that's not overexposed, as long as you set your base exposure to not be overexposed. And you can run it for 3 hours. And
Sony, if you're listening, this is how you build software.
yes, it'd be amazing. It's funny because when I heard, what was going on with Olympus, with this buyout by this company in Japan. They're the company that bought out the Sony Vaio computer line, by the way. Mm-hmm. So they like to jump in and try to take a brand that's dying and bring it back to life, which the Sony Vaio line is huge in Japan still. It's just not here. My hope was, though, that, and it sounds horrible, but if Olympus was going to completely fail, my hope is that they'd have a fire sale on all their patented technologies like that. Or there are several technologies in the Olympus cameras that I think Olympus just did a horrible job at marketing because people aren't aware of them. That live composite is one. There should be television commercials showing what that can do. I mean,
yeah, that's awesome.
A pure amateur with no photographic abilities can get incredible fireworks photos, star trail photos, lightning photos, light trail photos, things like that with very, very, very minimal instruction on how to do it. And they've got another feature that's amazing to me is Pro Capture, which is, this is nuts. You do a half shutter press, get your focus locked, and just keep holding the shutter at the half pressed state. When you're doing that, it's recording 60 frames a second raw files into a buffer. And then, so the example I like to use is you want to get that shot of your kid hitting a baseball at his game, but you want the shot where the bat is connecting with the ball. You've got your finger on the trigger, half pressed, waiting. He swings, you hit the button. Chances are you weren't fast enough to get that exact frame, but it doesn't matter because it was recording 60 frames a second leading up to that. So even if you were a second too late in hitting the button, you have up to like 15 frames prior that are all recorded. And I use that for capturing daytime lightning photos. I don't need a trigger. I don't need to use ND filters to do a long exposure. I just keep my finger half pressed. And as soon as I see a flash, I hit the button. And I have not gotten a lightning photo that way during broad daylight.
That's awesome. And see, that's the type of stuff. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I would say that's the type of stuff like I've complained about before, is that seems like a feature that, like, there's similar features in like phones now and how it's continuously running behind the scenes shooting even though you're not hitting the button. Yeah. Like, why are more smarts not coming to cameras? It's like, and Sony's like an extreme example. Like, this is funny because Sony's an extreme example of doing the absolute minimum, and then Olympus seems to be like right up there leading in terms of software, like in-body stuff that it can actually do.
Yeah, they're so the big buzzword in the last year or so is computational photography. I think Olympus was spearheading that a year before you heard about it in like a Google Pixel or an iPhone or something like that. So live composite is a computational photography trick. Mm-hmm. Olympus is Pro Capture, not so much computational photography, but it's reliant on the fact that the higher end Olympus cameras have dual processors in them, like dual quad core processors in them. So they're like powerhouses, of computing. And there are other technologies. There's like basically they call it live ND. It's like a software ND filter. It'll just layer image after image after image after image after image to simulate what would look like a long exposure, kind of the way I think you can do that on an iPhone. And again, Olympus has been doing that for, a year and a half, 2 years now. And it kills me. It breaks my heart, having represented them for so long that they had such innovative technology for years, but they just didn't market it. And nobody knew that it was out there. And my hope now is that maybe that software, those tricks can trickle down into other brands. Maybe they need to license it out, because I would kill to have live composite in a full frame in a Sony camera. It'd be astounding, to couple the low light capabilities with, live composite or something like that.
Mm-hmm. They're going to make you buy another camera for that, though.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, they won't release it in a firmware update. I'm finding out since having a Sony that the firmware updates really don't make sense. I think it's the A7R4 has the ability, or maybe it's the A9 too. I don't know what it is. One of them has the ability to, if you're going to change lenses, it closes the curtain so you don't get dust on the sensor. I mean, that's literally software programming to tell it, hey, we're going to change the lens, close the curtain.
I remember seeing that come up in conversation recently because it's the first time in like a year they pushed out a firmware update for some of the A7 series.
Yeah.
And like someone was talking about this. It's like, why have they not pushed this down? It's the dumbest thing. And like some people were talking, like the A7 III in particular, like, well, with the whole shutter thing and like every actuation could be its last.
Yeah.
Because the A7 III and the allegedly weak shutter, more fragile shutter than the other ones.
Yep. I'll tell you what the sensor's good at in that, though, is dust, collecting it.
It's amazing.
I've never dealt with anything like that in my life. Again, I'm not here to try to pitch Olympus constantly, but, having spent so much time with it, I know it inside and out. But I think I've cleaned sensors on Olympus cameras twice in 10 years, and I'm a jerk when I'm out shooting with my camera. I'll be on the beach, and it's blowing, and I'm pulling lenses off. Just because it handled it so well, I didn't care,
Yeah, I did. I made that mistake once. I was up in Michigan City, or over in Michigan City, rather. And it was a very windy day. And in hindsight, looking back, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? Because like the sun, I got there a little late. It got darker than I wanted because it was right after I'd gotten my 1-400.
Mm-hmm.
So I really wanted to use it. But I got there and it got dark too quick. Plus, it was really windy. And that giant lens with the lens hood was like a sail.
Yeah.
And like windy enough that it was very hard to stay steady, and like dropping the shutter speed, it was like 1 out of every 10 shots was maybe passable.
Yeah.
And so like, I got to change it, but it took me forever to walk out there. It's like, I think I can block the wind and do it.
Right.
And then I was like, oh, and then the next day, like I went shooting, and that was the first real eye-opening experience of like just how much dust can get in there, because then it was brighter and I was somewhere else the next day, and when I was looking at those pictures, it was painstaking to do the
dust removal, spot removal.
Yeah, like I'm not even kidding, 45 minutes on one image and I'm done, and I look at it and like Lightroom is just chugging because it's just dots everywhere.
Yeah. No, I get it. You're talking about the long exposure. This will be the last Olympus thing I talk about. If we ever meet up and shoot, I'll bring an Olympus camera so you can check out the image stabilization. That'll blow your mind. You can handhold 5-second shots without trying.
That would be awesome.
I mean, not with my longest lens. My longest lens is a 300, which would be like a 600 on full frame. I mean, not on that lens, but like on my 12-40, which would be like a 24-80 at 80 millimeters, you could hold a 5-second shot. I mean, you could.
See, that's still awesome though.
Darn near be convulsing and hold a shot for that. So it's pretty cool.
I would really like that.
But it's probably just because the sensor size is so small. It's got so much room to float, to stay stable. I mean, I know that my Sony, the A7 III, has 5-axis image stabilization, but my keeper rate trying long exposures isn't quite as good.
Yeah, the longest I have handheld one, freestanding, that I've kept that I've really liked was a quarter of a second, maybe an eighth, and then like if I brace on something, I've gone as low as like right around a second.
Yeah,
that's really sketchy.
But I've learned since using the Sony that I can just jack the ISO up pretty far, to get a faster shutter speed if I need it, where I couldn't do that on the Olympus at all.
That is true. Yeah, I was gonna say there, but not shutters. It's not related to ISO. Have you used, kind of sidestepping, but talking about software? Have you played with that feature in Lightroom that came out about a month ago? Within the last month, it was like an enhanced sharpening.
In Adobe Camera Raw. Not
Lightroom.
It's funny, they literally call it enhance, like it's from some old cop series on TV. Enhance that image. It's pretty cool. I'm pretty impressed by it. I've seen really good results if you take a good image and enhance it. They turn out better lots of times. More detail. It's pretty wild. But
yeah, because that's my dilemma now. Is I'd gotten the A7 III, and based off of rumors of what the A7 IV would be, it's like, okay, I'll turn around and sell the A7 III and get the 4 whenever it comes out. But as time goes on, I'm leaning more towards just keeping the A7 III as like the low light one.
Yeah.
Chances are the A7 IV, if they do bump it up by 50% pixels, like they would have to improve the sensor just to keep it the same.
Sure.
More or less.
Yep.
So I'm thinking I'm just going to end up keeping that one. And then I really do want like a higher megapixel, like the R4. But at this point, it's old enough. I'm like, if I just wait, the R5 is probably not too far off. And then I can have a high megapixel, daylight image, or a daylight body, and then a low light body.
It's funny. I'm going in the exact opposite direction in my thought process. So I was eyeing like an A7R4 because at first I thought, I want to shoot with something like much higher resolution. And then I started really just stopping and thinking about it. 99% of the people that look at my images look at them on their phone. And I could shoot it with a pinhole camera and people would be like, oh my God, that's great. So I'm thinking my route is probably, now that Adobe Camera Raw has that enhance function, my high megapixel camera will probably be my A7 III, and then I just enhance those, and that'll bump those. That'll like double the resolution almost, right? So that puts that at like a 40-ish megapixel image. And then I'm gonna go backwards in megapixel count for the low light and look at an A7S. It's 12 megapixels, but the sensor sites are like huge. Right. So, I mean, I don't know if you've seen video or photos from the A7S III.
I've seen a lot of video, but I haven't really, if you've got links, you have to send them to me because I would love to see it. I haven't seen like a really good in-depth photography review with it because everyone tends to focus on just the video aspect of it.
Exactly. Yep. So I do a lot of research on Flickr. It's the easiest resource I think I found for finding an image. You can just go there and just do a search A7S III, and you're not going to find hardly any video at all. You're going to find a ton of photos. But just based off of what I've seen for its low light capability, again, because I want to shoot astro. I've got a trip. I'm leading a workshop in Wyoming this August, and I've got travel vouchers to Iceland that I didn't get to use because of COVID. So I might be planning that trip around Northern Lights. So a low light camera for me is, I think, what's going to make sense. And if I need to bump up the resolution from 12 megapixels, which again, for people viewing on their phone or tablet or something like that is plenty, I'll just throw it into Adobe Camera Raw and upsize that to a 24 megapixel image, which would be what my A7 III is out of the gate. But now I've got the added benefit of like crazy low light photography, with really clean high ISO. And then I've got my go-to workhorse Sony, which would be the A7 III. But again, it's like this, how many cameras do I need? It's like, I think I need to...
You're starting fresh, so it's all reset. Right. Don't think about the other ones.
Yeah, I just need to start selling stuff off of that shelf in my other room to fund the A7S.
Yeah, now threw another wrench into my plan.
Like I said, I mean, I've done, over the years, because of, the work that I've done with Olympus, I've had a lot of magazine spots. I've had stuff on billboards. I've had images that are used in corporate conference rooms that are 15 foot tall by 40 foot wide that were shot on 12 megapixel cameras. So I mean, things are scalable. It's just you're not going to scale it up on a screen. So if your audience or clients are only going to view them on like a 5K display or a 4K TV, I get where the megapixels matter, or if you need to zoom in, really, if you need to crop in because you're a wildlife shooter and you don't have the lens for the reach, I mean, higher megapixel makes sense. Or if you're a retoucher and you need to zoom in and every pixel matters when you're, cloning and editing, I get that too. There's use cases for sure. I just know for me and what I do, social media and just sharing online, 24 is more than enough for me. I love the allure of 40 megapixel. I mean, hell, I'm super interested. If I've thought about reaching back out to Fuji to get another loaner to try out the GFX 100. I mean, I don't need 100 megapixels, but damn, it'd be fun to shoot with it.
Yeah, it would.
And it's actually I think about the same price or less maybe than Sony's latest camera.
Oh well. Yeah, the A1. Yeah, that one.
It's like $7,000 almost.
Yeah, it's up there. It's somewhere between 6 and 7. Yeah. That is God, you just lust after it. It's like, man, I want that, but what a $6,000. $7,000.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying not to go down that rabbit hole, that rat race. I'm trying to focus more on, when the world clears up a little bit, spending my dollars on travel.
That makes sense. A lot better return.
Oh, for sure. The trip that I went to Wyoming on last year, I took my two sons. My wife passed away 2 years ago, and I wanted to do something with my boys, just to keep our batteries recharged and, make some good positive life memories, post that event. So we took a 10-day trip. We flew into Denver and we drove 3,200 miles over the course of 10 days from Colorado through the Rockies to Utah, into Nevada, back up into Utah again, over into Wyoming, back down into Colorado. This huge 10-day loop, seeing national parks and all the sites. And I'd been to Utah several times before, lead workshops and to go snowboarding, but never for personal reasons, with photography. And it was just, I decided, okay, that's it. I'm spending my dollars on travel. And then COVID hits. I mean, it was during COVID when we went on that trip, but it got, significantly worse, because we went in June, at the end of May, first week of June. And, things were really starting to pick up then. And by the time we got home, like, the whole country was in chaos. So just been kind of sitting on the travel plans for a while now since then.
Yeah, 30. Did you actually start off from here or from Michigan?
We flew from Detroit to Denver, and then and we did the 3,200 miles.
That's insane.
After it's bananas. My kids don't want to do it again. They have no interest, because our original trip was supposed to be Iceland for 10 days, and then Iceland closed the borders, so I had to cancel that and get the travel vouchers and all that from Iceland Air. And I told them, I said, we're gonna do something. So I just kind of threw together this itinerary for the Southwest. And we did that. And then after 10 days, the kids were like, you should have brought a friend. I think that was their way of saying you talk a lot. And they were pretty tolerant of the fact that, every 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, hold on, I got to pull over real quick, and jump out, and I'm taking a picture of a canyon or cowboys on horses or a sign or a rock or whatever. They were just like, what the hell is he doing? I don't get this, And they were pretty forgiving until, we'd hit those random spots where no cell service and they're in the middle of streaming something, and then they're just staring at me like, when's the next town? When's the next town? But it was
How old
fun.
are they?
So my oldest just turned 20 and my youngest is 15. So they're old enough to be self-sufficient and impatient.
They're old enough to know they should have cached that stuff offline.
Yes. Well, we learned that pretty quick. Somewhere in the middle of southwest Utah, we stopped, and I told him, I says, look, download whatever movies, whatever songs, whatever it is you need, as you stock up now, because I don't know when we're getting signal again. So they did. We figured it out.
That's hilarious.
Hopefully they remember all of those things. I think they will.
So you're gonna try to get back to Iceland this year. Where else? Where else do you want to go?
Oh boy. So I've been to Maui a couple times. I'd like to go back to Hawaii, but to go to Kauai instead of Maui.
Mm-hmm.
Kauai is less populated. It's where they did a lot of filming for Jurassic Park. It's just amazing. That's where I'd like to go stateside. But sitting on these travel vouchers for Iceland is probably just not going to be what it originally was going to be after learning my lesson with my kids for 10 days. I think Iceland will be a layover. So I'm thinking we're going to go to Scotland and spend probably like 4 or 5 days in Scotland and then a couple of days in Iceland, and just make it like a 6-day trip and not 10 days stuck with Dad.
There's a lot of distilleries in Scotland.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I like Scotch.
Super photogenic ones, too. I know my sister and her boyfriend went there a couple of years ago. And all their distilleries, there's Scotch,
Yeah.
which is a perk. But just where they're located and the buildings themselves, everything is photogenic about them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a coworker, the HR person at the company I work for. Her and her husband went a few years back. They spent 5 days there and I think 5 days in London. She said she wished she had spent 10 days in Scotland. She said they would just jump in the car and just drive, and they'd be in the wherever, random, nowhere, countryside, and there's the remains of a castle that you could just pull over and walk up to. It's just sitting there, and it's really green, wet. I don't know. I'd like to go there. Just wherever we go, it's for photography. So, I mean, my bucket list of locations, though, for sure, is going to be Scotland. Iceland, I've wanted to go to forever. I'd like to make it back up to the Pacific Northwest. I've been up there one time. It was with Olympus in Whistler, British Columbia. But I'd like to make it to, Washington State, Oregon coast. Mm-hmm. But something that for sure is happening, and it could happen next week. I don't know. I am huge into storms. I like not tornadoes necessarily, but the big supercell UFO mothership looking cloud structures. I'm dying to shoot that stuff. So my kids know that it might be one of those days where I wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm flying out tonight and I'll be back in 4 days. And my plan is to just keep an eye on the weather in the plain states as the storm season starts to ramp up, and I was going to jump on a plane, probably fly into Kansas City or something, rent a car, and just chase storms for 4 or 5 days and photograph those. So that's not, I'm not really giving you an exact location of, what's on my list of travel plans, but the plain states, photographing storms is going to be one of those.
That'll be awesome.
I mean, I've hit a good chunk. I've got a map on the wall with pins in it up here, and, east of the Mississippi, I've covered a lot of it, and I've covered the Southwest really well, in California, but the middle of the country is devoid of pins, and I'm hoping to change that this year.
I mean, it is devoid of a lot of things in general.
Corn. There's
Yeah,
corn.
there's
and
corn,
wheat.
but best place for storms.
Yeah,
One of the
for
best
sure.
places.
in the wide open, vistas, I think will be fun. If I can find, again, I mentioned it way earlier. I am firm believer in having, a good foreground element in your shots. So it'll be nice to get out there where it's wide open for 50 miles with no trees to watch the storms come in. But I mean, I'll be darned if I don't find something to have in the foreground. I'll just probably run out and get selfies in front of it. I love doing that, call me narcissist or whatever. But, I have been taking the, photos from the back of me, selfies in locations, all over the country, for the last 7-8 years. So if I can't find a windmill or an old barn or an old farmhouse, this mug will be the foreground element in those shots for sure.
Gotta make it work.
Yeah, definitely. Do you do any kind of like image share on this?
We are completely winging it. This is the first one that's going to be a video. I am more than happy to do image sharing. Cool. Yeah, so far it hasn't been because they've all been audio only and obvious reasons. Can't see anything.
Yep. So how about if I do that?
Yeah, go for it.
As soon as it pops up. And I don't know if you have to authorize it or if you can see it.
It's in there already.
You can see it?
Yep.
Oh, I'm not used to this format. So I'll just run through a few images, just kind of showcase a little bit of, like what I like to do, I guess. Mm-hmm. So we talked earlier about the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So hopefully some of your listeners have never visited the Upper Peninsula. It's very unlike the rest of Michigan. Once you cross the Mackinac Bridge, you feel like you just went into a different country. It's very rugged, rocky, a lot of remoteness, trails that go for miles and miles and miles.
It's just it's Canada, and we stole it from them.
Shh. They want it back. and the people up there want to be a part of Canada, too. Some of them do.
You're not joking.
No, completely. But I've led workshops up there, I think, for the last 3 years. And this shot was just taken at, I love saying this one because I'm probably doing it wrong, but it's Okundakun Falls. And I went up there with a buddy of mine that I lead workshops with, Mark Miller. He's not sponsored by Vanguard anymore, darn it. Well, he was a Vanguard ambassador like me for a while. He's since moved on to another company. But anyways, he called me up one day and said, hey, we haven't gone anywhere because of COVID. Do you want to jet up to the UP for a couple of days? I said, yeah, sign me up. So him and I just booked up there. It was our first time shooting the UP without leading a group of people. So it was pretty fun to explore on our own without having to teach the whole time. Mm-hmm. But we walked back to this waterfall. It's an easy walk, like a mile back or something like that. And we went in the fall. Obviously we have some fall color going on there, but this was shot, I believe, with my Olympus camera, and I'm using Nisi filter, so it's like a 6-stop ND filter on there. But again, just kind of the things I like to do. I like to be outdoors. I tell people nature and wildlife, but if it's outside my front door, it's fair game, so I shoot everything. And this was shot on a day when we were supposed to be getting stormy weather, but it just never seemed to develop. I mean, you can see a little bit of what looks like mammatus clouds kind of in that big structure over that grain bin or whatever it is. But just randomly driving around, I'm always looking for, again, like a foreground element in this rusty red wagon sitting out in this field of, I don't know what it is. It almost looks like canola in a way.
What focal range is that?
So this is on the Sony, and this is with the Rokinon or Samyang 14 millimeter 2.8. So pretty wide. That's one of the things I love about the Sony, the aspect ratio. Micro Four Thirds is taller than it is wide, and then you switch over to like the Sony, and everything feels like a pano to me after shooting the other format for so long. So a lot of my shots, I'm really loving, throwing that 14 millimeter on. It's the widest lens I've got right now for that. And I shoot a lot of bracketed shots if I'm too lazy to pull out my filters. Otherwise, I'll throw filters on just to kind of balance out my exposures. But so this is
it doesn't get much wider.
No,
there's some 12s.
Right.
There's definitely some fisheyes at 10. I swear I saw a 10 that wasn't a fisheye, but I could be mistaken.
That would be crazy.
Or it may have been a APS-C.
Yeah, I've got a Russian fisheye that my girlfriend gave me. That is, I think, 10 millimeter. It's manual focus, of course, but it's pretty cool. I don't shoot with it very often. I should probably start playing with that a little bit more. This was shot just the other day. So I shot this barn that I have a photograph a little bit later on that'll show up. So I shot this barn, the one that really made me become a photographer. I shot it for a decade regularly, and I'll tell the story about why I'm not shooting it now a little bit later. But so now I've moved on to shooting this truck, and this was just the other day. We're finally getting into the season where, you know, it's a little bit nicer out. We have clouds, and it's not just a gray film in the sky. So as the sun was going down, I noticed that we were starting to get color, and this truck is only like 2 miles from my house. So I raced out there and ran out into the field and set up and just shot a series of shots out there. And this is shot with the the Tamron 17 to 28. And I've got a reverse graduated neutral density filter on this shot. This is shot along the Lake Michigan coast at what is my favorite lighthouse. It's Point Betsy, and that's probably a good 2.5 hours, I think, 2 hours north of Grand Haven. That's a gorgeous lighthouse, but it has these steel breakwaters that jut out into the lake, and the color that you see in the water there, that's not post. That's how it is. It's this crazy Caribbean, you know, tourmaline green, you know.
That's awesome.
Water.
That horizon line is so crisp.
And this is shot with the Olympus OMD EM1X, and you know, so that's a 20 megapixel camera, but it has this sensor shift technology, and the sensor basically moves like one sensor sight at a time, kind of in a circular motion, we'll say. So it basically does, you know, 20 megapixels of the red sensor, 20 megapixels of the green, 20 megapixels of the blue, and then, you know, like 20 megapixels of the full scene, and then it in camera merges it all together into an 80 megapixel raw file. So that's the crispness of this image is due pretty much just to that. So this was, again, that sensor shift technology, and it's shot it's got a reverse neutral graduated filter on it, just to kind of balance out the exposure. But because of that technique where it's doing the sensor shift, it makes it a little bit longer exposure. Mm-hmm. So that softened up the water quite a bit for that shot. The next shot, again, another Olympus. You know, I told you when I go shoot lightning and things like that, that's when I grab the Olympus because of that live composite feature. Mm-hmm. So the lightning bolt you see on the left was about 35 minutes after the sunset you see on the right. So when I set up my camera, I was photographing that sunset originally, taking shot after shot because it was just ridiculous. There's no post-processing to this one either. This is just how that night was. Jerry was out there that night. It didn't even make sense. The sky was so amazing. But my last shot, because I knew the storms were rolling in, I set up one of my cameras and exposed for the sunset. And then I just let that live composite roll. And about 35, 40 minutes later, the first bolts of lightning were starting to show up. And then that's when that one showed up. So that's about a 40-minute exposure.
That is insane.
This next shot is that barn that I said I'd been shooting for like 10 years. A buddy of mine is a editor over at the Photo Focus website, and LoomCube got a hold of him and sent him some sample units for him to do a review on. And he got a hold of me and said, "Hey, I've got these review units. Do you have any fun ideas?" And I said, "Yeah, let's stick some on my drone and we'll go out and shoot some long exposures out at my barn." So he drove down to my house, you know, just about an hour away from him, and we stood out in the freezing cold with several other photographers we invited, and I set up my camera to do the long exposure shot because I wanted the star trails that you see going on. And while that exposure was running, I flew my drone out there and circled the barn and did the halo. But the way I got this shot is after I did that for everybody else, I flew the drone out, started the halo, because the DJI drones, you can put in different modes, and one of them is like this, basically a circling mode, point of interest mode. So I set it up to do that. I let it do the full circle while I was running my exposure, and then I put a card in front of my lens, flew the drone back out of the shot, remove the card from in front of the camera, and then let it run for about 25 minutes to get the stars rotating. So by putting the card in front of it, you didn't see the drone streaking through the sky coming back to land where we were at. So again, this barn I shot well before it had a big hole in the front end, and there's a hole that matched on the other end of it. But that barn collapsed literally on the day I was in Wyoming shooting this barn. So this is the TA Moulton barn. It's part of Mormon Row in Grand Teton National Park in Jackson, Wyoming. And I was out there for sunrise shooting this at the same time that we were having a massive windstorm back home. And I like to tell people that my barn found out I was cheating on her with this barn, got pissed off and fell apart. So, but so that ended my decade-long affair with one barn, which I sound like such a weirdo right now. That's just kind of how it is.
Now you got to find a new barn.
Yeah. So the truck has become my new barn, so far anyways. But this is shot with the Sony, the A7 III, and I think I had the Tamron 28-75 on for this shot. I wanted something very similar to this, and I kind of lucked out with it. So most of the shots I've seen of the barn out there, it's usually blue skies, but we got out there early enough in the year to where there was a lot of atmosphere, still a lot of snow in the mountains, and I just got a really great sunrise. I had to put up with a couple of really weird photographers that morning, but it was worth it in the end to get these shots.
That one's awesome with those mountains.
And then the last one was my buddy Mark Miller and we led a workshop in Moab a couple years ago, pre-COVID, out in Arches National Park. And man, if you want to go somewhere dark, go to Utah, go to southern Utah. It's just astounding how clear the skies are and how much you can see. And this was shot before I had access to a Sony camera. And this is actually, that workshop is one of the reasons that I really wanted to get a Sony camera, because I had several people that I was working with on the workshop who had Sony cameras. And while I know the technical and the fundamentals and what to tell everybody, I don't know how to find it on their, I didn't know how to find it on their cameras. So I had a lady who was out there trying to get this shot, and she was struggling to find settings on her Sony, and I sat there in a chair next to her for probably 15 minutes till I figured out her camera and got her positioned and set up to shoot. So
to be fair, probably 3/4 of the people at Sony don't know where anything's at in their menu system either.
Yeah. It was trying, to say the least. So you know what? I'm wondering. So I see on my screen, it says presentation. It shows my screen. It's got a little speaker with an arrow through it. So hopefully you can hear me on that end. I think you can, because I'm talking to you and you're responding. But
oh yeah, I can hear you. Can you not hear me?
No, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay.
I'm just thinking, man, I've said a whole lot of stuff about these pictures. You're laughing. I'm pretty sure you hear me, but so anyways, this was shot with the OMD EM1X, and I think I had on there 12mm f2. And this is really pushing the boundaries of what I think you can do with the Micro Four Thirds sensor when it comes to low light photography. I know I could have went out there with my A7 III and grand slammed it probably a lot easier with a lot less noise than I did on this. There's a lot of post to clean up noise.
What were the settings on this one?
So let me see if I can pull that up. I don't know if my EXIF's is still going to be maintained here or not. ISO 3200. Yep, it was the 12mm f2 at f2, and my exposure time. Where's it at? 25 seconds. So it's a little long. I'm starting to see a little movement in the stars on it. I probably should have scaled back to like 20 seconds. But again, for Micro Four Thirds, I'd say that's not too horrible for ISO 3200. I just know that on the Sony at ISO 3200 it would have been a lot cleaner. A lot cleaner.
I am sure the Olympus has a mode for it. Is there
like a dark frame subtraction?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, it does that too. So I use that. Sometimes I hate using it because if I'm running like a 30-second exposure, now I've got 30 seconds of waiting while it runs, the black frame. But yeah, this is even with that turned on. So, there's pluses and minuses, I guess, to every system. With the Olympus, I think that the minuses are going to be that you just have, less headroom when it comes to dynamic range and noise. But it's not that it's totally usable though. You just have to know how to.
No, like I'm still kind of in the. I like to shoot everything. Like there's definitely some things that I've focused on that are what I'm gravitating towards. But I still like to shoot a lot of different stuff, and one of those is like animals and wildlife. And I think that was the. It's like before I got my Sony, when I was looking at other cameras, that was one thing that I thought about was. While you might lose some on the low light end of the spectrum, for like zoom and whatnot, that kind of plays in your favor. The gear doesn't have to be as large and heavy and
big time
and costly.
Right. Yeah. So like my go-to wildlife kit is the OMD EM1X, which is kind of their flagship right now, and their 300 millimeter f4, which is a 600 millimeter f4 on full frame. And then I throw my 1.4 teleconverter on it. Now it's f5.6, but it's 720 millimeter equivalent. I mean, you can't beat it. My girlfriend went on safari in Africa 2 years ago, and the group that she went with, Wild Eye is the name of the tour group in Kenya, and a lot of those guys are starting to switch over to Olympus just because of that. I mean, they can have massive amounts of reach. The shutter speed that you can get on like the EM1X, if you're an electronic shutter, it's 60 frames a second. You couple that with something like the Pro Capture where you're never going to miss the decisive moment, and it becomes really like the ultimate wildlife rig. Their autofocus has gotten super good now. They've got these modes that you can choose, like if you're photographing birds, it uses their AI to know what the shape of a bird is, and it'll differentiate that between branches and clouds and just lock right on and track.
That's
plus,
awesome.
Again, couple all that stuff with the image stabilization, and you really can't go wrong with it. I mean, I've gotten some amazing bird photos with my Olympus gear. Just astounding.
What's like some of the longer lenses for Olympus? Like what do they typically cost?
It sucks. You're asking a guy who got it all for free.
Well,
all the time.
That's fair.
I think that the if I'm not mistaken, I think that the 300 millimeter f4 was $2,500. So it's not super cheap.
No, but F4. It's not terrible. Did you see the like the one I thought there were both 600. The two Canon lenses that just came out.
Yeah.
One's $12,000. It's an f4. It's a 600 mil f4, and then they had a I don't think it was 600. I think it was a 400 f2.8, and that one was only $11,000. Actually, it was 12 and 13,000. I'm sorry.
Oh my god, that's crazy. But f2.8, I mean, that has to be a monster.
Oh, it is. They're bazookas.
Yeah. So the equivalents from Olympus are, I mean, if I wasn't tethered by my earplugs, I'd grab my 300. You'd be surprised. It's like this long. It's tiny, and it's an f4 and it's image stabilized.
Is it just 300 or is it zooming?
It's a fixed 300. They do have my other lens that I have is a 40 to 150 2.8.
That's awesome.
Fixed 2.8. So
that would be nice. I've noticed like to have a zoom that was fixed, like with that much of a range that isn't massive. Because really all you've got in the Sony full frame space are like the 70 to like the bigger zooms, like the 70 to 200, and that's about it. That stays constant. Everything else
is
Well-
going to be variable.
Well, the Olympus, when you get down to equivalency and field of view, it's going to be the same as an 80 to 300, because it's crop. So it's still going to be kind of like the Sony, but a little longer on the wide end and a lot longer on the long end. It's an extra 100 millimeter on the long end, but fixed 2.8, and it accepts the teleconverters as well. So, and Olympus has a 1.4 and a 2. So, and people are doing crazy things. People are taking like macro extension tubes, the ones with autofocus contacts on them, and they're putting the 10 millimeter focus tube in between the two teleconverters. So basically, you're getting a 1.4 and a 2, so you're getting like a 3.4 teleconverter, and then slapping that on things like the 300. So you're just getting like these astronomical focal lengths, again, from a kit, with a lens that ends up being, this long. You're getting something that's like, it's like the freaking Hubble telescope, on a camera.
That's amazing.
It's bananas. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
And it all costs less than $3,000.
Much. Yeah, much less. For sure.
That is amazing.
Yep.
Shoot. It's been an hour already. More than an hour.
They talk your ear off yet?
Oh no, that's perfectly all right. That's the point of the podcast. Meet new people, hear interesting stories. Yeah, I'm gonna have to make it up there sometime soon.
Yeah,
I'll definitely make it up there sometime soon, but like further up there.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know when you're headed up. I'm sure we could definitely make something work. I know Jerry too, so like I said, keep your eye on the weather. Storms moving. It's fun. It's a blast to hang out on the pier, as the storms are coming in. Everybody's so hyped up and excited, every time there's a flash of lightning, everybody's like, did you get that one? And everybody's running back and forth, looking at the back of cameras, and it's a blast. It's like a really cool social experience for photography, for sure.
I say the closest thing I've had to that recently was I was in Chicago about a month ago, and it happened to be around sunset. We were right on I forget the park. It's one that faces. There's like a little bay, but water comes in a little bit, and so you're facing the skyline, and it was just lined with photographers.
Yeah, probably like North Beach or something.
Yeah, might be that one.
Yep, yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I was just in Chicago a couple weeks ago. It's fun. I like going over there. I like visiting the big cities. It's not really, my wheelhouse to be shooting in a city, but I always find something to be, fascinated by when I'm there shooting. So Chicago's fun. It's like New York, but cleaner and less people.
Exactly. And objectively better pizza.
Oh gosh, yeah, definitely. So when we were there, I'd only had Giordano's before, so we had Lou Malnati's this last time. That was definitely better than Giordano's, I think. I still haven't tried Gino's yet. That'll be next.
They're not bad. I think
if you like deep dish.
Yeah, I think Giordano's better. There's another place. I don't know if they have it in downtown actually. And it's called Mama Luna's.
Yeah.
That one was good. I'm sure. I don't know if they have more than one. I remember going to a friend's house once. It was northwest of the city, and he kept raving about it. So we tried it. And, I mean, it was amazing, but it was dense.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite things about travel too. Finding things to eat. Whether it's pizza or when we were in Jackson, Wyoming, I was eating elk and buffalo. Or in New York, you're in Little Italy buying cannoli, whatever, just wherever you're at, just try to find the thing,
That's the best part about some of the bigger cities like Chicago, New York, Boston. Even there's all those little areas like Chinatown or Little Italy. They all have their own version of it.
For sure. Yep. Yeah, I've never visited Chinatown in Chicago though, so I don't know.
I have not either.
It seems like it's pretty small. I've been to New York and San Francisco's Chinatowns, but every time I go to Chicago, it never even dawns on me that it's an option for some reason. I'm probably missing out. But
Yeah, I am talking completely out of my ass at the moment, but it seems like it's smaller than even like Boston's.
yeah.
It's like I
I mean, I
know
would just
Boston's isn't huge, but like it's at least a couple blocks.
yeah. I didn't get to see my first
Maybe more.
actual like travel experience for Olympus was Boston. I flew into Boston and then did a presentation up in Ipswich, which is north of Boston. But I didn't really get to see the city at all there. I wish I would have. I did have the Olympus rep. He owned a boat, so he drove us, whatever you call boating. He boated us around the harbors there in Boston, took us to Wahlburgers, like their OG spot, where they first started, and drinks at their mother's restaurant next door. And that was as close as I got to see in the city. I got to see the skyline from the water. I would have loved to have gotten into the city, though, and just kind of explored and did some street shooting. But
Boston is definitely cool. Go back and spend a day or two.
Yeah, definitely.
A lot to see.
I've got a lot on the East Coast I want to see still. Boston's part of it, so.
You've been doing this a long time. I am, I guess in that sense, not surprised to see. Do you still use Flickr a lot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I sure do. Yep.
So
I'll send you links to all my social and where people can find me if you're going to throw it in the show description or whatever.
Yeah, I'll toss it in the show notes. Feel free, like if you want to blast them all now. Otherwise, I'll include them in the show notes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if anybody that wants to follow what I do on Instagram, I've been marginally absent from there lately. But if you follow MacDonald, MacDonald _photo, that's how you'll find me on Instagram. Just search my name on Facebook. I'm public, so everybody can see all the ridiculous things I say all the time. And you just search for Jamie, Jamie, MacDonald, all like one thing. That's how you can find me on there. As far as Flickr goes, honestly, I don't even really remember like what the heck like my screen name or anything like that is. Because I got on Flickr, I think. So if you this is going to show my my age here. So if you go to Flickr and type in a search for Sleestack, there's an old show called Land of the Lost. I mean, I'm like super old. And there were these creatures called Sleestack. And I spelled it like a hacker though, because I'm corny when I was a kid or younger. It's SL33STAK. If you do a search for that, that's my username on there, which is so lame. I can't believe I can't change it, but I can't.
So that I would say that explains the email.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. So that's where you would find my images on Flickr by doing a search for that. And I've been on Flickr since 2006. I've been a Flickr Pro member since
OG.
Like 2007. Yeah, for sure. Definitely way back in the day. And then I do a podcast, like we mentioned earlier, we were talking about. And I've been doing that for 6 years now. And the name of that podcast is Mirrorless Minutes. And we're everywhere. The Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, wherever you get your audio fix, I guess, that has podcasts, we're there. So it's a fun listen. It's not technical, a lot of banter, kind of a lot of chit chat, maybe a little drinking every once in a while. But it's always photography for sure is the focus of it. But again, like I said, I'll shoot you over the links to those, make it easier for people, and they can just click on those links maybe.
That'd be perfect. Well, Jamie, I appreciate it. I'm definitely going to have you on again.
For sure.
Especially as the year goes on, now that we're all kind of getting out again and exploring some more. We'll have some stories, I'm sure.
I'm making them all the time, or at least I'm trying to.
It's the best you can do.
I'm not making them in photos, I'm making them in experiences, or both. So
exactly. Well, thank you again, sir.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be on. I'd be glad to do it. Can't wait to have you on our show. So it'll be a good time. If you come on, if you like to drink, don't be afraid to bring a beer or a mixed drink or whatever. It's not a requisite though.
Just roll up a keg.
Yep, there you go. The show will be very interesting. 40 minutes in.
Well, preface it with a case race. Not a cake. We'll do a case race.
There we go. Holy cow. I'll be done quick. You'll be hosting the show 20 minutes in.
Cool.
Well, until we meet again, Mr. MacDonald.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.